We're on to our next presentation by my co-organizer, Alexander Maxwell. He'll be talking about his Habsburg officials and the idea of Slavic language that they were developing. So the floor is yours.
Okay, so my name is Alexander Maxwell, and as it happens, I am obsessed with the language-dialect dichotomy. I have been since I was in graduate school. Now, as the language-dialect dichotomy plays out in the Habsburg monarchy, I'm particularly interested in the idea, which was very common among the patriotic Slav intelligentsia, that there is a single Slavic language, of which Czech, Polish, Russian, Dalmatian, Croatian, whatever, are merely dialects. It's easy to document this sort of belief. I found this map from Slavic, the great Slovak scholar who settled in Prague. This is an ethnographic map of Europe. You can see that German Europe is shaded yellow, the Romanian Europe is shaded blue, and the Slavic Europe is all shaded the exact same green color. Bohemia, Russia, Bulgaria, it's all the same green because this is all the same language, the Slavic language. And the accompanying text in the book where this map was published makes it even more explicit. This is a Savic's description of the Slavic language family. You can see a lot of very familiar glottonyms and names, a lot of familiar varieties that today would be considered separate Slavic languages, but Savic calls them either dialects or subdialects. Of course, Savic is a very exceptional individual, a person of extraordinary learning, but also therefore atypical. But even if you look at less glamorous Slavic intellectuals, you can very frequently see that grammars are written of a dialect, not of a language, that pamphlets are written in defense of dialects and the need to write in that dialect rather than the need to write in languages. And this is maybe the most explicit. It's a grammar book of the Illyrian dialect of the Slavic language. Now, I've done a lot of work on Pan-Slavism, and I've even done an article recently about why it is that I think experts in the Habsburg monarchy, you, my dear colleagues, don't appreciate just how much Pan-Slavism there is, just how common this belief was that all the Slavic languages are really one language, and that Czech, Polish, and so forth are merely dialects rather than separate languages. But the starting point of my investigation is my belief that this is very widespread, more widespread than people think. So I became interested to see if I could find ways to, or find evidence that this belief was shared by sections of society outside the patriotic intelligentsia. Now, I guess what we'd most like to see is evidence of what the plowing peasants thought. Did the ordinary Slavic peasant view himself as speaking the Slavic language as opposed to the Czech language or the Croatian language or anything else? Now, at this stage in my career, I have essentially despaired of ever finding evidence one way or the other about what plowing peasants thought about this sort of question. I'm not sure the question is meaningful to illiterate peasants. But I did find that I was able to document how bureaucrats saw the Slavic varieties. And I was able to show that a lot of bureaucrats are imagining a single Slavic language. Now, before we discuss the evidence I found, we do need to note that bureaucrats are influenced by the terminology of the empire. And the bureaucracy of the Habsburg Empire tended to view linguistic diversity with its own particular jargon. And that jargon was mostly about different types of language. I think this is a pretty typical text. It discusses the court system in Galicia, and in the discussion, it concepts the Geschäftssprache der Provinz, the business language of the province, with the Gerichtssprache and the Landessprache. So we have three different types of language, three different social spheres in which different languages might be used or be accepted, but they're all different types of Sprache. So there's not a sense of a Sprache and a Mundart or a Sprache and a dialect. Even in the most hierarchical contexts, such as the army, one contrasts the Kommandosprache or Dienstsprache, the language of command, with the Regimentssprachen, the Sprachen of the ordinary soldiers. Now, it's clear that there's a hierarchical relationship here between the Kommandosprache and the Regimentssprachen, but that hierarchical relationship is not formulated in terms of the language-dialect dichotomy that so fascinates me. The most common administrative terms in the monarchy are the Landessprachen and the Landesüblichen Sprachen, which are originally terminological alternatives, although some scholars seem to think at the end of the monarchy they acquire slightly different meanings. They're often translated as regional languages. I prefer to translate this as provincial languages because I think the Land of the Landessprache is a crown land. And I think crown land is better understood as province than region because it's an administrative unit. But in 1850, in the aftermath of the 1840 revolution, when the Habsburg monarchy first starts committing itself to linguistic diversity, Bach and Stadion make a list of Landessprachen. Here's their list. They list 10 Landessprachen, and those are the ones that are Slavic. So in 1850, Bach and Stadion do not imagine a single Slavic language. They imagine 6 Slavic languages, or at least Slavic Landessprachen. But this list is very complicated. Consider this language number 4, Bohemian, simultaneously Moravian and Slovak written language. Does this mean that Slovak is a separate language? Is Slovak rather than part of Bohemian? Should I translate Bohemian as Czech? Is Moravian equally separate? And what about Silesian? Silesian isn't listed here at all. Does that mean it's a separate variety? It's totally unclear what to make of this list. And if you imagine, say, the court system in Austrian Silesia, just a year later, discussing a court case, they don't refer to this, this list at all. It's a description of the court proceedings and someone is found guilty, but it talks about the judge translating eyewitness testimony into the Slavic language and giving the summary of the findings in the hier üblichen slawischen Sprache. So it doesn't refer to the list at all because it isn't seemingly not relevant to local concerns. Furthermore, the local account does refer to Slavic apparently as a single language. Another thing about this, this list of these 6 varieties is 8 and 9. The Serbisch Illyrisch occurs twice, depending on what Schrift or lettern it appears in. And the second version is equated with Croatian, which is also sort of interesting. But if you imagine, say, local officials in Croatia, they don't refer to these analytical categories. I found, for example, this job advert. This is a school in Zagreb, which would like to hire a teacher for a local school. And they want that teacher to speak Croatisch Illyrisch oder eine nachverwandte slawische Sprache, Croatian Illyrian, or a closely related Slavic language. So is Croatisch Illyrisch the same thing as Illyrisch Serbisch? It's not clear. Furthermore, just a few years later, another school in Zagreb, or maybe the same school, it's not entirely clear, asked for a teacher who speaks Illyrisch oder eine verwandte slawische Sprache. And shortly after that, Kroatisch oder eine selbe verwandte slawische Sprache. So the school officials in Zagreb don't seem very clear what language they're actually looking for, whether it's Croatian Illyrian, whether it's Illyrian or Croatian. They can't make up their minds. But the other thing that's interesting about this particular series of adverts is the idea that a closely related language would do. So I became curious to see if there would be job adverts that allow candidates to meet the language requirements by substituting one Slavic language for another. And it turns out there's a whole bunch. Here, for example, is a post for an accountant. The accountant is supposed to be Polish, but eine andere slawische Sprache can be substituted. Apparently, the one Slavic language can be replaced with another. This is a post in a Hungarian journal for a doctor who speaks Serbian or Vajmash Slavnev. Another Slavic language is just as good as Serbian. You can substitute at will. Now, if you can substitute one Slavic variety for another, then the question arises, can you find job adverts that simply ask for a Slavic language, any Slavic language? For example, here, this is for a forester. The forester is to speak German, but also eine slawische Sprache, any Slavic language. Doesn't matter which Slavic language, one is as good as the other. So nemet meg edge Slavnevet, doesn't matter which Slavnev. Here is for a forester who should speak a Slavic language, doesn't matter which one. And here's a lawyer who should speak Valami Slavnev, doesn't matter which one is as good as the other. Now, if one Slavic language is good as another, you might ask if job adverts simply ask for the Slavic language in the singular, not edge Slavnev, but o Slavnev, der slawische Sprache, anstatt einer slawischen Sprache. And it turns out that that's easy to find. Here I found 2 on the same page of this one journal. This is maybe the most exotic job posting I'm going to show you. It's for a school for the children of diplomats in Istanbul. The teacher is supposed to know German, Italian, French, Hungarian, and Slavic, imagined as a distinct language. Here's another one, a Slavnev, doesn't matter which one. Now, if you have a single Slavic language, and it's only the one, and you are actually looking for expertise maybe in a particular variety of Slavic, can you find a job advert that asks for a Slavic dialect? Yes, you can. Here's a customs official. The official is supposed to speak Polish oder sonst eine slawische Mundart, implicitly downgrading Polish to the status of dialect. Here's another one for a surgeon. The surgeon to speak einer slawischen Mundart. And here's another one. They want the administrator to speak einer slawischen Mundart. And this one as well. Now, this advert is particularly interesting because it contrasts the Slavish Mundart with the Italian and German language. Italian and German are languages, but Slavic, the local, whatever Slavic variety you speak, it's just a Mundart. Here's another one. Deutsch und Italienischen Sprache. Eine slawische Mundart, Deutsch und Italienischen Sprache. And this particular advert, if I remember correctly, also appeared bilingually. And in Italian, they asked for lingua tedesca et italiana, but the Slavic is an idioma. This is maybe the most dramatic. The teacher is supposed to speak irgendeine slawische Mundart. Doesn't matter which one can be substituted for another. And if you look at specifically, people who apply for this post would be interviewed in a sort of a job interview in Brno in 1839. So there's Brno on the map, and that's the employer, Baron von Diller. Now, the interesting thing about this advert is, even though the interviews were in Brno, the advert itself is from a newspaper in Orava in Silesia. So apparently Silesia and Moravian, it's all the same. Even more dramatically, though, the post itself, the school for which he was advertising, is in what's now the Vojvodina. So school children in what's now Serbia, it's perfectly fine for them to be instructed by a teacher who speaks Moravian or Silesian. The army gave me one of the most interesting documents implying belief in a single Slavic language. It's this form you fill out if you want to be promoted. And one of the things you have to fill out in the form is your Sprachkenntnisse. What Sprachen do you know? The accompanying instructions are very explicit. First, you have to list your knowledge of German. Then you have to list your knowledge of any other languages spoken in the territory of the monarchy. And at the end, any foreign languages you know. So if you knew English or French, you would list that last. But the next bit says, the expression Slavic is not sufficient. You must list the relevant Mundart. Now, this passage seems to imply that the army is interested to know whether an officer speaks Polish or Carinthian. It's better to put the Polish-speaking officer with the Polish-speaking soldiers. But it is the form seems to suggest that the authorities fear that Habsburg military officers will simply write down that they speak Slavic, not thinking that the distinction between Polish and Carinthian is important. Furthermore, the passage implies the difference between Polish and Carinthian is the difference between Mundarten, and there's actually simply only one Slavic language. Furthermore, you can find almost identical wording in a similar form for the Landwehr. The expression Slavic is not enough. You must give the relevant Mundart. And this is a sample form for the Landwehr that's filled out, and it lists the examples as follows. Your knowledge of German, your knowledge of Moravian, and then your knowledge of French. So Moravian is also the sort of thing that you would be expected to write, not Czech. There's no sense of Czechness as a language. The local land is what's important, and the land in question is Moravian. So it seems to me that Moravian is just a dialect of something larger, but not of Czech, of Slavic. In the Habsburg military press, I found this discussion of Regimentssprachen, and it lists all the sorts of different Sprachen that an officer might learn, including German, Italian, and Hungarian. But in addition to all these Regimentssprachen, there's also a description that maybe officers might like to learn a Slavic dialect, or irgendein slavisches Idiom, ascribing Slavic a separate status from the languages. And why is that? Well, it's because the Slavic languages are mutually comprehensible. A Pole can learn Bohemian or Serbian and vice versa. A Slovene learns Bohemian and Polish. They're mutually comprehensible. One's as good as the other. you can substitute one for the other. That's what makes them a dialect rather than eine selbstständige Sprache. In the police, you can also find evidence of this, idea that all Slavs speak a single language. This is a post for a wanted criminal, and the suspect speaks the Böhmisch-Mährischen dialect. Note that the police use the word dialect and not Mundart. It's the only ministry in the Habsburg state that uses the word dialect instead of Mundart. I'm not quite sure why that is. Here's an example of a suspect who speaks Slavish and Serbian dialecte. And finally, a wanted criminal who has escaped and is suspected to be in Croatia or in another angrenzend Kronland, wo Slavisch gesprochen ist. So the Dalmatia or Slavonia, these are places not where Croatian or Illyrian is spoken, but simply Slavic. Now these police wanted ads are numerous, and they're kind of standardized. And I thought that I might be able to use them to give some sort of more statistical analysis for how widespread this tendency was. And up to now, I've given lots of evidence of adverts that seem to posit a single Slavic language. But how widespread is that? How common is that? So what I did is I went through the sample year of 1860 of the Zentralpolizeiblatt, and I looked at every single advert or posting for any wanted criminal or any suspect that was described by a language, and wrote down how that language was described for Slavic. Dear colleagues, take a guess. How many of these suspects were described as speaking Slavish as opposed to Böhmisch, Polnish, or anything particular? Do you have a percentage number in mind? How widespread do you think it was to imagine Slavish as the variety of a suspect? Correct answer is it's pretty widespread. It's far and away the most common description for criminals in the Habsburg state. Furthermore, the particular varieties are much smaller. Now, I did then get the idea to plot these on a map, and the map is also kind of interesting. It's very geographically listed. So on this map, the red dots are the locations of suspects who speak Slavish, and the blue dots are suspects who speak any sort of particular variety, Czech, Polish, Slovak, whatever it is. And you can see that it's much more common to do this for suspects inside the Kingdom of Hungary than for suspects beyond. It raises the idea that perhaps people using the word Slavish simply as a stylistic alternative for Slovakish. There is some counter evidence, namely that Slovakish does appear on that list. There are 7 suspects who are described as speakers of Slovakish as opposed to speakers of Slavish. But maybe there is some sort of geographical dimension to the perception of a single Slavic language. Indeed, if Slovaks are more likely than other Slavs to be seen as speaking Slavic, it may reflect the influence of the Pan-Slav intelligentsia. Safrzik, as I mentioned, he was a Slovak, even if he did settle in Prague. Jan Kolar, the great poet and polemicist of the single Slavic idea, he was also Slovak. And Jan Herkel, the person who actually coined the word Pan-Slav for his Pan-Slav grammar, he was a Slovak as well. So the idea that maybe the Habsburg authorities and Habsburg police and Habsburg officials might have been influenced by the Pan-Slav intelligentsia maybe bears some investigation. If there is influence, it's limited. If you look at how Pan-Slavs imagine the administration of the Habsburg monarchy, they often refer not to Landessprachen, but to Landesmundarten. After all, Polish or Czech, these are merely Mundarten. Insofar as they're official vehicles for administration, that would make them Landesmundarten. And I found that in the writings of Karadzic, and I found it in Safrzik. I have not found any Habsburg documents that imagine a Landesmundart, however. They are always imagining a Landessprachen. Now, the final thought I'd like to leave you with is that this story sheds some light on, I think, on the division between the political Pan-Slavism and the literary Pan-Slavism. My people who believe in a single Slavic language and are trying to cultivate Slavic literature on the assumption that all Slavs speak the same language and that Russian, Polish, and so forth are merely dialects of that common language, are often accused of being Russophile traitors and spies of the Tsar and so forth. And they respond by distinguishing a literary Pan-Slavism or a spiritual Pan-Slavism from the political Pan-Slavism they reject. And they are routinely disbelieved. Hungarians and Germans see in the literary Pan-Slavism merely a puppet of the Russian Romanov expansionism and so on and so forth. And strikingly, it seems that a lot of subsequent literature does the same thing. I think scholars may be influenced by the Hroch schema ABC, see the idea of a single Pan-Slav language as merely a front for the desire for the political unification of all Slavs under the Russian rule. But if that's the case, then that suggests that there are a lot of Pan-Slavs in the Habsburg state apparatus. There seems to be a lot of state officials and teachers and even military officers who are positing a single Slavic language. That's the literary Pan-Slavism. So it does seem to provide some evidence that the literary Pan-Slavism and the political Pan-Slavism may not be very closely related at all. Thank you very much for your attention.